Good afternoon. I hope lunch was great. Good to see you all. Overwhelmed already. Our discussion today is planning a system assessment, a TRIRIGA system assessment. Some folks call them health checks, others call them analysis. Anyway, this is what we're going to talk about today. We'll do some brief introductions so you know who I am and who Chris is and what our backgrounds are. Then I'll give you a little background about Northwestern University. I'll share our journey with TRIRIGA so you get a little idea of where we started and where we've been. I'll talk about how we use the application. And then we'll talk about what led us to decide to do a system analysis. There's several factors. Maybe you'll understand some of those, maybe not, I don't know. And then Chris will actually go into what the analysis is, the JLL analysis, and how it was performed. And then we'll share some slides about the recommendations, and we'll talk about outcomes. So I am Randy Henry. I'm at Northwestern University. This is my 35th year. The first 17 years were spent in the procurement and contract administration arena. The last 18 years here have been all about IT. Initially a systems analyst for many years. I now manage a team, a fairly large team, with 3 applications: the research applications, the financials, and the facilities management applications.
And I'm Chris Ellis. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm the Director of Platform Services at JLL Technologies, which includes infrastructure services and cloud hosting teams. I've actually been working with TRIRIGA for about 20 years. I was with TRIRIGA and IBM for 9 years. And now I've been with JLL for 10 years.
So maybe real quick questions here. So let's talk about platforms. How many of you are potentially still on 3.7, between 3.7 and 4.0? Anybody? All right. How about 4.2, 4.4? Anybody going to be moving to 5? Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you. Which applications are people on? Who's on 10.7 to 11 right now? Okay, well, you guys are still far back on the other stuff. All right. What about 11.0 to 11.2? All right. And then who's thinking about moving to 11.6 here? Awesome. Thank you. How many of you are on-prem? All right. How many folks have it up in the cloud? Who's SaaS here? Okay. And who here does their own projects internally to do their upgrades? All right. And the rest of you, like us, probably get a third party to come in and help out? Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I think those were the questions I was going to ask. A little bit about Northwestern. We've got 3 campuses. Our main campus is in Evanston, Illinois, which is the first suburb north of Chicago. That's our headquarters, basically. And we've got 12 schools and colleges throughout there. But our Chicago campus is where our medical school and our law school is located, and several of our research facilities. We do have a location in Qatar. The folks that are there are basically from that region that go that part of our university. And then we've got some satellites in DC, San Fran, and Coral Springs. These are just some of the stats there. The student body, as you can see, we've got 8,000 undergrads and 14,000 grad students. And then as far as faculty is concerned, we just have a little over 3,300, and there's 6,500 of us full and part-time staffers. Just some facility specs over there for you. We've got a couple hundred buildings, and we're managing over 16 million square feet. This just gives you a small idea of the team that I have. I've got 3 internal analysts or system analysts that I've worked with on a daily basis, and I do have 2 developers, actually 1.5, but 2. So this gives you an idea of what people are doing with facilities, and I'll go into that a little more in a minute. But obviously IT supports it. The universities and schools use the operation maintenance for submitting service requests, things like this. And obviously facilities uses it for O&M, parts inventory, some assets that we maintain. We do have capital projects for obvious, new building and renovations, et cetera. The project managers use that. And then one of the reasons that we got it in the first place, and I'll share that with you, is space management. We do an annual space assessment every year. So in '08, we implemented Famous. That's where we were beforehand. And at the time, we were just moving off mainframe. We also implemented PeopleSoft Financials, and we integrated these. And we got rid of a lot of other standalones at the time. I think Projecto for project management, Sims for locations and space, and there could have been a couple others in there. But we moved to TRIRIGA, and one of the reasons we did that was, the space functionality first and foremost, but it really gave us everything else we needed too. And we're going to build slowly, and we did. So in 2017, we implemented Space First, and as you can see, we started on application 10.5, and the platform was 3.6. In 2018, we implemented capital projects, and then in 2020, we brought up operations and maintenance. We did our first upgrade in 2022, and you can see with the application and platform we moved to, we ran into some huge performance issues. The first 6 months were hellish. And the usual suspects here, the IBS spec assignments indexes were a mess. We had incredibly long running queries and data volumes with our mobile app are syncing. And I'm not blaming the mobile app, by the way. We'll talk about that later. It has nothing to do with the mobile app. It has everything to do with how we do business. We had long-running integrations that were overlapping and kind of canceling each other out, so we had to change some of that scheduling. Obvious DB maintenance items that we figured out as we were moving along. And then we had a lot of locking tables and records that were behind our Tableau reports. We actually moved our reporting off the server that we were maintaining everything else. I think we moved that over to a BERT service, and that's where we're keeping our Tableau instance. Then again in 2023, we decided to try another upgrade. We ran into some similar issues with that one. Not as long. It was, I think the first time we had problems, it was over 6 months. The second time around, I think we had issues for maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And we were able to get some consistency, but we're still having issues, performance issues. And we'll talk about that as we go along with the presentation here. So what are some of the factors that led us up to getting a system analysis? First and foremost, the stakeholders were losing, they didn't trust the application. And it was hard enough to start, bringing people in, and getting everyone to use it in the first place, right? So now that if there are going to be performance issues, nobody wants to touch it. Every time we started talking about upgrades, they didn't want to do the upgrade. For instance, we did not do one this year. Why would we do an upgrade every year? The university, because of security issues and other things, we're basically doing run projects, on all of our applications. So we're constantly upgrading. But we do the same thing with TRIRIGA, or try to. Anyway, with the inconsistencies and continual performance issues, we weren't able to, nail down any root causes, and we were still having problems with getting a resolution path. How do we address these things, or in a more appropriate way? And then, of course, our stakeholders and information technology. Let's put it this way, they don't listen to us, right? I can give you any recommendation, and I can tell you to change some of your business process and consider this or that. They weren't listening to us. So the reason we got a third party to come in, unbiased, neutral, recommendations came from this overall assessment. And it's important because even though we probably identified some of the same things that came out of this assessment, they listened to them, not to me. So it was important. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. There are a lot of things to consider, and probably you folks put together contracts and agreements or different RFPs all the time. But I think it's important, give as much background about your application when you're asking folks to take a look at this. Give them your whole history. When did you implement? When did you do your upgrades, et cetera, so they can understand some of the pain points. We talk about our integrations. We didn't spend a lot of time doing that, but it was part of the RFQ. We would like an evaluation of our integrations if possible. Talk about the timing. How long is it going to take to do? What did we do? 6 to 8 weeks, was it?
Yeah,
roughly.
Time, yeah.
Okay. Discuss the evaluation, but more importantly, what are the deliverables going to be? We also created a major scorecard that we all, the stakeholders and IT, put effort into, so we're using the same baseline to make the decisions we did when we chose JLL. And the stakeholders, very important to this whole process. We collaborated and kept them involved so they knew what was going on the whole time.
So question for everyone, has anyone not had stability or performance issues? You've had a perfect system, right? Yeah, right, Max. So a lot of times when you have performance issues or stability issues, you want to just go directly to that issue. So like I said, I've been doing this 20 years, and so I've learned over the years that you don't get so laser focused on the specific issue that's happening. You really need to look at the big picture. So that's why, 20 years ago, pretty much, I created this type of assessment. And I'm not the only one that does this. So let me get that straight. And I'm not the only one that could do it, or JLL, and there are other partners, and everyone has the tools that they need, and I'll talk about that. But there's a lot of reasons to do this, and like I said, big picture. It's a useful tool. We talked about why Northwestern needed it. But you can also do it for many other reasons. One, to benchmark your system. I've even had customers before where we did this where they just went live, but they wanted a benchmark and a documentation of their system. So that's one reason. And then a lot of times though, there's some kind of issue or stability problems. And so that's when they'll come to us or someone and it'll just come up in conversation about the issues, and I'm like, well, let's look at the bigger picture. You don't want to go chasing a red herring or something. So really the way to do that is to get a big picture, document an entire week use of the system. So that's what this is all about, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But just talking about the whys. We talked about stability, so there might be new features that are coming out that you're about to go upgrade or implement, and so this is a way to document what your system was doing before the changes. Especially if you've already been testing it in QA or staging and production has still not been upgraded yet. Typically you want to do the system assessment in production where you actually have the use of the system. So then there's the what. So what is the system assessment? As Randy said, there's a lot of different names. It's been called health check, system analysis over the years, system assessment. That's kind of what I settled on, to separate it from a business health check that really looks into the use of the application. This is very technical. We get into a lot of details. We collect a lot of data. And so it's just a massive amount of data over a 1 to 2 weeks time frame. And so basically we're collecting everything about the architecture, the system, specs, network infrastructure, speed, configuration, and mainly the transactional data. So some of you may know this, but TRIRIGA has the tools. They were built many years ago to enable logging, which you can actually track every transaction in your TRIRIGA system without pitting much of a hit on the system. So you can actually track it. It creates very large files. They're not verbose, but they're detailed in each transaction. So with that information, we can actually collect and gather everything that's happening in the system. So if you take all that information, as I list out here, you're looking at the big picture and you're gathering everything end to end. From the performance, the architecture, the transactional data, the data composition, you know, how large are your tables? A lot of times I can't tell you how many times I'm looking at the tables and I just find tables that are 10 million rows and it's like, why is that 10 million rows? So a lot of times it's informational. You weren't even looking for it, but you find things. So that's my goal when I do this, is I'm actually looking for stuff that stands out that no one knew about. So that's preparing for it.
I guess that's me.
Well, we can both talk to it.
All right. Well, I really wanted this to stand out because I want everybody to understand this was like a small project. Even though it was only 6 to 8 weeks, it was like, you know, getting the right people, you know, at the table, you know, our technical as well as our functional SMEs, you know, those who understand the business processing, who can, you know, understand why we're talking about these different tables and where the problems exist, et cetera. So people who understand the front end as well as our developers who understand the back end. And it just so happens our technical developers, one of them used to work with you all, right? Mark?
Yeah.
Mark. And so we do have in-house expertise. The second bullet here is really important. There are a lot of things that none of us can touch. IBM did have to be, you know, helping us quite a bit. So we needed to get the right resource on the IBM side to help us with this assessment. If there are other vendor partners, and we do, we have several partners, and he's sitting in this room right now, you know, maybe consider working with them as well, doing this assessment. I don't think we really needed to for this assessment because many of the things we already had a good handle on, but I would have called my partners if we had questions and we needed JLL to understand what was going on. And then this last bullet, really important, meet weekly. You know, we did have updates every week, and even though Chris could have gone back, you know, and sat down with all the data, right, the pages and pages, we did have status updates. We did have questions. He probably had questions for us as well as we were going through the process. So really important steps. Run it like a small project.
Yeah, and on that point, so the actual work doesn't take 6 to 8 weeks, but as I mentioned, sometimes we'll turn the logging on for 1 to 2 weeks. And so that time we're collecting other data. And so something else that I don't have on a slide, but it can all be done remotely. Many years ago, I used to go on site and just help customers get through this process. But now, you know, ever since pandemic, and we really found ways to just come up with checklists to go through everything we need to collect to provide this information. And it can all be done remotely, even if it's SaaS. So that's something that I don't think you mentioned yet, was that they're on IBM SaaS. So this was done with even all of the vendors, you know, multiple people involved. So you had a question?
Yeah, so my question is, I guess, more for Northwestern. How were you able to determine that the issue was your use of the application as opposed to the environment being IBM their SaaS environment?
That's what this was for.
That's what this is for,
Yeah. No one officially knew. There was speculation, but no one knew. And so they needed raw factual data. And that's what this is.
So we're, just a background, we're going to be brand new to this, so I have very little knowledge of that. I guess my question is, IBM doesn't have resources that help you determine that?
Yeah.
Do you have a comment on that? I'll give my comment.
I guess my concern is you guys spend money.
We do have IBM resources, and IBM did work with us. It took a while to get the right people in the room during that time. But, you know, I've got a wonderful CSM, and, you know, when he came aboard, again, we could get the right people at the room and start having the discussion. Did they have technical resources? Of course. You know, we were meeting with an IBM technical developer. Yeah. But I think there's only so much, you know, they can look at everything from a peripheral view, right? And they can tell you where things may be coming up or not. But they don't know your business processes. They don't know how you're putting these transactions in. They don't understand how many work task assignments are gumming things up, et cetera, et cetera. So without them fully understanding your business, those technical folks on the IBM side really not going to be able to assess and help you out. If that's a fair statement, I hope.
Right, and it's, I mean, like we said, it's a multi-week engagement. That's a lot of time. Like, who's paying for that time, and who's, you know, IBM is not going to invest 3 weeks of free time to dig in end to end into the system and their use of it. So
yeah, I was more curious, like the toll it's putting on the system, just those types of metrics that, you know.
yeah, well, and I can get into that, and we can definitely have Q&A and talk more detail on that. So, you know, leading into the next steps is they had decided, okay, we're going to do this, and so this was the next step was, okay, how are we going to start this project and kick it off? So what I like to do is actually have a kickoff meeting with the key stakeholders, talk about what the process is, the timeline, what we're going to be gathering so that we can get the right people to provide the right information and files that we need, you know, and make sure that everyone's understanding and feels comfortable with turning on the logging, because most of us have been through the issues where we turn on logging and it blows up the system or slows it down. And so that's one of the things. So just got to ensure that the confidence is there, that yes, we can check these boxes, turn this on and run it for a week. In some cases, some customers will have 10 gigs or more of files per day that are generated just because they have that much transactions. Like we have some customers that are somewhere in the lines of over 50,000 workflows in a day. And so like when you have that in multiple workflow servers, it's a lot of data and it's a lot to parse. So that's one of the processes that I do too. It's a lot of work to take all those large files and process them through the tool that I built. So this just talks through the process of reviewing that initial meeting. So what is provided? So for, like I said, anybody can do this and slice it however they want, do it however they want. The process that I've built over the years is I provide a document that documents all the findings, a summary, not everything. It still sometimes can get over 100 pages long because there's a lot of information. I like to provide all the information from what was found and where the recommendations are coming from. So you have the facts and you have the recommendations. So one of the things we found, so we have a meeting, we discuss the report, we go through it, talk about the recommendations. But so with Northwestern, we had basically over 8 million transactions captured within a 5-day time frame. So that's all of the queries and extended formulas and workflows and integrations and all that's been captured, system metrics. Their database utilization, what we found was 90% and above every day, but only during the workday when people were in the system. So at the end of the day, you'd see it just kind of go down. And so, you know, there's a lot of things you can kind of get from that. But that told me that it was definitely something happening with the use of the system and what they're doing. But so then I could go and look at other metrics or other data that I had to see, okay, where is this coming from? But to the point, it's facts, it's data, it's not speculation. So we have all the data there to back it up. So we had a lot of long running queries too. That's really a lot of where that 90% came from, where there was queries that were running for over a minute per query, 12,000 times in a week. So yeah, it was pretty much those were the smoking guns that we found. So basically it was the use of the mobile app that was really the heavy hitter. So there was other things that were discovered and put in the report, but they're low hanging, like they weren't really as important as this big heavy hitter, which you don't want to work on all these other small things and then you solve the bigger problem and now the small things were a waste of time to work on. So that's kind of, this is just showing you what we had discovered and what we presented to them. So another point to make is that what I do is I don't make any changes. And if I see something that's really wrong or it's not following best practices, I don't do anything about it. I just document it and I say, we really shouldn't be doing this. You really should be following best practice. Then we can discuss it, discuss what's the priority, what's the level of effort, and work through that. And so then based on that summary, and like I said, so it's not always a quick solution. You know, you get through this 8-week process, you may not, at the end of the 8 weeks, have everything solved and everything's running faster. You have to work through these and you got to one by one tackle the issue. So I'll let Randy speak to some of that.
Well, the first one is something that we did take to heart, and we worked with the stakeholders, and they did start closing a lot of the older work tasks or completed work tasks, and archiving, some older data, which they just didn't need on a daily basis. The Java memory setting, I think what you had said it was optimized between 6 and 8 gigs. We found just because of our high usage that we had to kick it up to 12. We altered our integration schedule. So when, I think our PO integration is probably our largest problem. Instead of doing it 2 or more times a day, we do it overnight now. So it's not colliding with anything during the day, nor is it potentially clobbering itself if we were doing multiple runs a day.
And that's one of the things we discovered with the metrics. We were able to graph out the JVM utilization, and we saw these huge spikes in the JVM on the app server or the process server. And so then I was able to get a timestamp, go back and look in the transactional logs and see what was causing that, and we discovered it was the integration. So we were like, okay, let's move that off to a different time. So that was a big discovery also.
Because Mark does work for us and used to work with Chris, et cetera, we did create a schedule internally to monitor ourselves. So we do, do some logging and look at that. We're considering converting the IB spec assignments. Haven't tried that yet. Obviously, we'll do it in a lower environment and see if things blow up, but it's a consideration. I'll let you know how it comes out.
So you may know that as the MLA,
Yeah.
Has anyone done that yet? Have they seen any real improvement?
Significant improvement.
Yes?
Reports running from 35 minutes, those reports down to 30 seconds to 1 minute.
Wow, that's good timing.
Like
So,
easy counting reports.
yeah. So Max is saying that by doing that upgrade where it changes the module level associations, the MLA, change, that it can drastically affect reports.
We had
Timings.
to rewrite some of the reports because we were using the back database for it, but that was
Right.
a minor undertaking, significant improvement.
That's good. So there you go, Randy.
Okay.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the last item on here, the queries and the report performance. As I told you, we did move our Tableau reports to a separate server. And we also worked with users. Instead of kicking off these queries and never letting them complete, they kept kicking off the same queries to try to get to a lot of this information that we could make static reports. So that's what we've done. We've created a lot of Tableau reports that are static and don't have to be done real time, et cetera. So
yeah, a lot of that has to do with user training. And so sometimes, users that don't know how the technical system works, they might, if it's not responding quick enough, they hit it again. And so I think there was a lot of that happening. And then when you get these long running queries, it would just stack and get worse and worse and just kill the whole day.
So some things that we've also done that aren't listed here, but I thought I'd talk about it a little bit, is how did we take these recommendations and really, bring them to fruition, or at least discuss them openly with the stakeholders. And it really did boil down to what I was trying to explain earlier. Can we look at business processing and maybe change how you're doing business? Do you really need to have, I forget how many work tasks the technicians are calling up on their mobile devices when they're out in the field, but it's thousands. They don't need thousands of work tasks assigned to them or not assigned. That's one of the big problems. We finally, I think, hired a planner scheduler. At least we'll try it in a workshop and see how that works. But hopefully that planning and assigning of tasks in a meaningful way, as opposed to having these work groups and these just thousands and thousands of assignments that are impossible to sync up in a meaningful way, of course. But we're having that discussion now. Like I said, it took this assessment to actually have that discussion. For years, like I said, nobody's been listening to me. Nobody's been willing to look at how they do things. It's the system's fault. No, it's shared responsibility here. Let's try to change some stuff. So it's because of the assessment that we're having, again, that realistic discussion. And it's not IT making the decisions for the business. The business, again, has somebody else who's telling them some of the same things. So it was important to go through this.
Yeah, and a couple other things that, we've now set a benchmark, and so now if, even if Mark does it on his own, I'm very open, and Mark, as Randy said, used to work for me. He knows the process, so he can do kind of their own mini assessment and actually collect the data maybe 6 months from now and look at it and compare it to the data from this report because it was a snapshot in time. So that's very powerful. We do that for other customers where we'll actually do it on a quarterly or biannually basis, and you can actually see like the growth of the system, the storage, you can see the user adoption and whether the user counts on the daily concurrency went up or down. So there's a lot of powerful information because we didn't talk about all the granular detail, but that's also something that's provided is the session history and kind of going through how many users you have in a day in the system. But it's all there. It's like nothing special. There's no special tool that I'm using different than anyone else in the room can do. So it's all there. It's just whether or not you're going to use it and empower it. So there was one other thing I was going to mention. I forgot, but I'll come up with it.